it has become commonplace in Western philosophy of science to apply to any problem what has become known as Occam's razor, which began as a principle by a philosopher of science named William of Occam, who declared that it was necessary for true science to razor away, eliminate any unnecessary hypotheses, any unnecessary steps of logic, any factors that were not essential to understanding a phenomenon, which made beauty, simplicity within complexity, the standard and the criterion for scientific credibility, elegance, and ultimately for the establishment of a theory as the best possible explanation. And it is through the success of that principle in leading to ever deeper levels of understanding and of technological development based upon the insights that were gained from the use of that razor, Occam's razor, that progress in scientific thought has been made. The scientist of consciousness, the yogi, must use another razor. We could call it Occam's razor, because what we must do is even more difficult, more fine, more sharp than what must be done in objective science. We must have a blade that is so thin that it can cut pure awareness away from thought, away from emotion, away from projection into identification with body. We must completely slice away pure awareness from all of the other layers of consciousness that produce a phenomenal identity as a person in a world, and to stay with that level of pure awareness that is completely unidentified with any thought, with any object, with any phenomenon, with any emotional, and that has no reaction to anything that occurs in any of those other layers. It is the absolute unmoving essence of pure presence. And this must be completely separated from all of the other levels and layers that are projected out from it in order to be established in that original absolute consciousness that is the pure awareness that is the presence of the Supreme Self, the Godhead. And once we have done that, once we have established a complete differential of pure awareness from all of the expressions and implications of the hypotheses developed by the thinking mind and by the reactive emotional mind, once we have done that, we will have achieved a state of pure, total peace that then will be able to pervade all of those other levels and bring clarity and bring serenity to all the levels of consciousness, including the body itself, which is consciousness in its most gross form, and then beyond the body into the cosmos itself, which is the ultimate body of God. And so it is this achievement of the using of the Ek Om, the realization of the one absolute intelligence, that brings us to the realization of its qualities as Satchit Ananda, and that liberates that pure awareness from any identification that creates karma, and that creates suffering, and that creates a continuity in the wheel of life and death, but creates the option of complete liberation from any engagement in the phenomenal outflow of consciousness into the world, and provides a safe haven, in fact, salvation itself, from all the suffering that the world is and that it produces, and instead brings about an inflow of pure, absolute peace into that realm through one's own liberation from being an ego that produces its own quantum of suffering that is added to the collective morphogenetic field. But instead, in the absence of an ego, in that vacuum that is produced, an explosion of absolute light and divine love and peace are disseminated into the world. And because we are now into the lead-up to the final war, in which many places will find themselves as ground zero of thermonuclear explosions, we must each be groundless zero of the Theo-Nuclear explosion of absolute bliss into the world, to counteract the destruction with absolute eternal life and light. That brings, again, a balance into the flow of the phenomenal and the noumenal, samsara and nirvana as a single whole, that brings about restoration and new life after death, and a new world after the old has been destroyed, as a needful medicine to end its suffering. But the suffering can be ended through the transcendence of the unreality of the world. And that is the function of the yogi, to take the upper death drive, not the lower, and to bring in the absolute truth into the world of the lie, and to bring that truth with total love in the all-pervading consciousness that contains and that animates and inspires and uplifts every being, because there is no longer any particular consciousness that judges or that stays separate and alienated from the creation, but that is the creator as creation in the ultimate paradoxical realization of the universal self manifesting through the particular, but not identified with it, and able, therefore, to be in a state of unconditionality. It is this absolute consciousness that the yogic mind becomes the instrument of transmitting, that produces the complete omnipresence of the Buddha nature, pervading the entire noosphere of the planet at the very moment that it becomes a radioactive ruin. It becomes simultaneously the splendor of the radiance of the presence of God that resolves all into the singularity of infinite supernal light. It is this light that overcomes the thermonuclear mushroom clouds and the infernal light of death with the absolute light of eternal life. This is our function in the ecosystem of the cosmos. And now we must flower as manifestations of liberated consciousness in order to fulfill that mission.